as we see in the caveat there from Anglo Gold Ashanti, is this the right metric to have? But this is a debate and a discussion which I'd like to see the investment community engaging more actively in. What we've also seen is a huge increase in companies' Scope 3 emissions. Now this is quite a heavy diagram to look at. What this shows is, you can even read it, but these are different types of Scope 3 emissions. The one at the top is employee commuting and business travel, and it shows the number of companies within the various sectors who are now reporting on these elements. Why is this important? Well, often in many companies, their biggest scope for making an improvement is not in their direct emissions, but in their indirect emissions. So we need to get a handle as to what are our indirect emissions? What is our potential to make improvements in that? I'm not going to dwell on this, you can look at that in more detail in the report. We're also seeing evidence of increased commitment and improved performance. Really encouraging. 31 companies now have greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. 22 have committed, additional 22 have committed to targets. This is a radical shift from where we were 4 years ago. Voluntary targets. Most of the companies are based in this country. I mean, some of them are obviously based overseas where they're within countries which have emissions reduction targets. We don't yet have that. They're still conditional. Hopefully it won't be before too long before we see emissions reduction targets in this country. But this is quite, I think, remarkable that we have these voluntary emission reduction targets being made. So let's talk about South Africa. We have ambitious, conditional, national mitigation targets. You see, this is from the extract of the statement that was made in Copenhagen last year. 34% deviation below business as usual emission growth trajectory by 2020. 42% below business as usual by 2025. These are significant commitments. If you look at what it means in practice, and this is based on a study come out of UCT, this shows in 2010 our current emission levels, 500 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent. If you apply these emission reduction commitments, basically we have to stay the same by 2020 and by 2025. You add on 2 new Eskom coal-fired power stations, you add on economic growth, and so on and so on. We realize this is quite a significant challenge. The question I then ask is, well, how does this compare to the targets that organizations are making? These are just some extracts. There are many. There's 2 pages worth at least table which shows the emission reduction commitments being made by business. Now it's a chance to interrogate. Some of these are ambitious. I think we need to compliment companies for making these voluntary targets. But let us think, if we have these conditional targets become less conditional, this shows the scope of the challenge that business leaders might be facing. And it's a chance for us to interrogate, are these targets, welcome as though they may be, are they sufficient? What we need to see also is a greater strategic appreciation. We need to see companies shift from seeing sustainability issues as ticking the box of the GRI, writing a sustainability report, ticking the box of the CDP, to understand that it's more strategic. I like what's in this Sanlam issue, to link it to fiduciary duty. Are organizations fulfilling their fiduciary duty in understanding and responding to ESG issues, environmental, social, and governance issues? I would suggest that in many instances, organizations are failing in their fiduciary duty because they have not sufficiently appreciated the extent of this. Interesting quote I like here from Bidvest. Focus here shifting from risk management, value protection, compliance, where sustainability is often seen, to trying to say, well, let's look at it in terms of entrepreneurship, creating value, taking an integrated approach, moving the debate from compliance to one of innovation, seeing it as Immelt has done in general GE. That's the shift in thinking that we need to see. We have some diverging views. We see here Group 5 making it clear that they see climate change providing more opportunities than risks. Construction sectors in a bit of a slump post the World Cup. With greater weather uncertainty, there is potential for more infrastructure development. There's a silver lining in this cloud. We saw the same from the medical respondents, which is a little bit dispiriting. And there's an upside to more people getting sick. But there are different views on this issue. This was another company who doesn't believe that this climate change aspect poses a significant material risk. They think climate in South Africa is relatively stable, weather events are predictable. And that's fair enough, that's their perspective. We got an intriguing response from one company. We're not in control of weather patterns, so we cannot plan for a non-event. Which I think is slightly disturbing. Okay, the moment everyone's been waiting for is the results of the Carbon Disclosure Leadership Index. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to give that to you. Just very briefly by way of background before the CDLI results were announced. Companies were included in the CDLI if they responded using the online response system, they made their responses publicly available, and then if they scored more than 50% in their disclosure rating using the PwC methodology. Using this approach, we now have 56 companies included on the CDLI. This is quite a large number of companies. So some might say, well, how can you call that a leadership index if you've got 56 companies? We can take the questions on that perhaps later if there are questions on that. What you'll see later this evening is there's going to be recognition for platinum companies, top 5 companies, got the 3 highest scores, and then gold, an additional 29 companies who scored more than 75% or more. What's very interesting is there's been a significant increase, evident increase in individual scores. 12 companies scoring 85% or more. Significant improvement, reflecting both the improved disclosure, but also, I think, in part, an easier and more user-friendly online response system. We're also seeing, once again, the predominance of the materials sector and the financial sector in their disclosure on climate change issues. We also did this year a performance score, and it looks at these issues. It looks at strategy, at governance, at stakeholder communications, and the achievements that you've made. And what we did is, again using the international methodology, is we rated companies into 4 different bands. And we used this fairly objective scoring system. We go through, and my colleague Anthony did that, went through the responses, and has scored the companies. So in band A, on performance, we got 4 companies. On band B, the fast following 26, 23 in band C, and 4 on band D. Just some observations. These performance points are aimed at recognizing where a company is taking positive action related to climate mitigation, adaptation, and transparency. It's based only on what is in the CDP submission, and on nothing else. And it's limited in considering the materiality of actions relative to a company's sector. I do urge you to bear in mind the caveats relating to the Disclosure Leadership Index and the Performance Index. Understand what it is and what it is not. I know for many, the primary interest of this report is, are they on the CDLI and what's their rating of performance. I hope we can take a more nuanced approach in understanding the benefit of this document. My closing thought. This is an interesting read, Thomas Friedman. Perhaps many of you read it. He makes the case we're in a world which is hot, climate change is flat, globalization is crowded. 607 billion people going up to 9 billion people. What's interesting is that quite a big shift from his earlier books, Lexis and the Olive Tree, where he was a big proponent of globalization and the American model. And it's an interesting shift. And what he did in this book, he outlines 3 systemic flaws which he believes contributed to the global financial crisis and to potential global ecological crisis. Firstly, systematic underpricing of the true costs and risks of our activities. Absolutely contribution to what happened in the global financial crisis. Secondly, pervasive application of the worst sort of business and ecological values, characterized by a profligate and hedonistic approach to economic life. And thirdly, which I think is most importantly, the tendency of markets to privatize gains and socialize losses. We're never going to address climate change unless we see business leaders saying, we are going to help you tackle these 3 issues. We're going to shift our values. And that's a tall ask to make in boardrooms, I would suggest. We're going to really be active agents for change and encourage the government to impose a carbon tax, because if we don't start paying the true price for carbon and other issues, we're not going to get out of this issue. And that is a challenge which I think is significant for business leaders. And my last comment is a quote from a rather prescient institutional investor, Jeremy Grantham. He foretold what happened with the elements of the financial crisis, and those in the investment community will all know his stuff, and he comes out with a very interesting quarterly newsletter. And he said global warming will be the most important investment issue for the foreseeable future. So my challenge is to the investment community, and this is one of the reasons why we encourage the CDP to come here, is to get more actively engaged in asking tough questions of the companies in which you invest. And I really hope that the information that's in this report will help you ask tough questions of the companies in which you invest, because you have the ability to really affect that change. So that's a challenge I pass on to the investment community and also to the business media, because I think you too are effective leaders of change. So, thanks very much.